So July was quite a month on the justice front. It started with Allen Weisselberg and the Trump Organization being criminally indicted, and it ended with a blockbuster revelation that Donald Trump told his Department of Justice officials to lie to the American people, tell them that the election was corrupt, and Donald Trump said, "I'll just take care of the rest." And on the legal front, the month of July had its ups and downs between those two stories. But I think it's fair to say that we continue to trend toward justice. Here's a legal recap of the month that was July 2021. Happy Indictment Day, everyone. So the Trump Organization and its chief financial officer, Allen Weisselberg, are criminally indicted. What does today's indictment mean, and where might things go from here? Let's talk about that. Because justice matters. So now that we've had some time to read and absorb what's in the 24-page indictment charging the Trump Organization and Allen Weisselberg with many crimes, I want to focus on just one sentence of that indictment because I think it provides some important foreshadowing about where the prosecutors might be going next in their investigation and prosecution. Let's talk about that. Because justice matters. So it seems like June came and went in the blink of an eye. I think it's worth noting that June began with Donald Trump telling everybody he would be reinstalled as president in August, and June ended with the Trump Organization being criminally indicted. So I'm going to say it was a pretty good month for justice. Here's a quick recap of the month that was June 2021. So Donald Trump said some things at last night's hate rally in Florida that are sure to be introduced as incriminating statements against him if and when the New York District Attorney indicts him for running the Trump Organization as a corrupt enterprise. Let's talk about that. Because justice matters. So in one of the most recent arrests of an insurrectionist, we see more evidence of the consequences of Donald Trump's criminal incitement. Let's talk about that. Because justice matters. So let's talk about legal precedent. The absence of legal precedent, and why the absence of legal precedent should not stop the Department of Justice from indicting a criminal former president. Because justice matters. So after a New York appellate court suspended Rudy Giuliani's license to practice law in the state of New York, today a D.C. Court of Appeals suspended Rudy Giuliani's license to practice law in the District of Columbia. Why? Well, because justice matters. So let's take on two quick topics regarding the January 6th insurrection. Topic one, a D.C. appellate court just made it a little bit easier to keep insurrectionists jailed pending trial. And topic two is something that prosecutors said in court today that might provide some important foreshadowing involving Donald Trump. Let's talk about that. Because justice matters. So Donald Trump has filed a transparently frivolous lawsuit against Twitter and Google and Facebook, and the lawsuit will be dismissed. But let's talk about how the lawyers for Twitter and Google and Facebook could have some real fun with it before the case gets dismissed. Because beating Donald Trump at his own game, like justice, matters. So it doesn't seem like everything's coming up roses for the relationship between co-defendants Allen Weisselberg and the Trump Organization. So what might happen next? Let's talk about that. Because justice matters. So during his confirmation hearing, Merrick Garland testified that this country protected his family. And because of that, he says he feels an obligation to pay back. Well, following up on that statement, Mr. Attorney General, I have one simple request. We, the people, have one simple request. Let's talk about what that one request is. Because justice matters. So, did you see any of the coverage of the CPAC conference? Did you see any of Donald Trump's speech? You know, the whole thing seemed to be one big fact-free zone. Not to mention decency-free zone, empathy-free zone, diversity-free zone, justice-free zone. Let's talk about that. Because justice matters. So there's some new evidence supporting the need for an investigation into Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh. And that new evidence comes from Donald Trump himself. Let's talk about that. Because justice matters. So where does the insurrection investigation stand at this moment? Well, let's look at a recent Department of Justice press release and then talk about whether it's moving us in the direction of justice. Because justice matters. So we just learned that our military leaders were prepared to stop a Donald Trump-led coup. And that is as it should be. Because justice matters. So Donald Trump just issued a statement talking about his kind of coup. You know what, Donald? You might want to remember that everything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Because justice matters. So when Donald Trump is finally prosecuted, and he will be, you know who will benefit as much as anybody else? The folks wearing the red hats. Let's talk about that. Because justice matters. So the first insurrectionist to plead guilty to a felony crime, a defendant by the name of Paul Hodgkins, was sentenced today in federal court in Washington, D.C., and his sentence was not exactly what most expected. Let's talk about that. Because justice matters. So yet another Donald Trump ally, associate, longtime friend, confidant, has been indicted. This time it's a guy named Tom Barrack. Let's talk about this latest indictment, and then let's try to figure out whether it might provide some momentum to move us in the direction of holding Donald Trump accountable for his many crimes. Because justice matters. So let's talk about this new criminal indictment of Donald Trump's longtime friend, associate, confidant, Tom Barrack, and why this criminal indictment has nothing to do with Tom Barrack just neglecting to fill out some paperwork with the Department of Justice announcing that he was a foreign agent. Because knowing whether our government officials are working in the best interests of a foreign government or whether they're working in the best interests of we the people, like justice, matters. So we finally learned a few years late that the FBI did not do the background investigation into Brett Kavanaugh's suitability to be a Supreme Court justice that it should have done. Let's talk about that. Because justice, particularly when it involves a Supreme Court justice, matters. So 4,500 citizen tips about Brett Kavanaugh's suitability to be a Supreme Court justice went uninvestigated by the FBI. The question is, what is our government going to do about it now? Let's talk about that. Because justice matters. So let's talk one more time about the revelation that the FBI, after setting up a tip line so people could provide information about Brett Kavanaugh's suitability to be a Supreme Court justice. After setting up that tip line, the FBI got 4,500 tips, and instead of investigating them, they delivered them to the White House, the very organization, the very people who were going to get Brett Kavanaugh confirmed by hook or by crook. Let's talk about what that does to the public's perception of the FBI and more broadly, our institutions of government. Because justice matters. So let's look for some good news on the justice front. A little bit of silver lining hiding behind the big black cloud that is Donald Trump. Because justice matters. So this guy holding the traitor sign at Tom Barrack's court hearing today in Brooklyn, New York, had it just about right. Let's talk about why that is. Because justice matters. Let's talk about United States Capitol Police officers Harry Dunn and Aquilino Gonell, and Metropolitan Police Department officers Michael Fanone and Daniel Hodges. 4 heroes who testified at today's House Select Committee hearing on the January 6th insurrection. And then let's talk about where we go from here. Because justice matters. So when it comes to holding Donald Trump accountable, is the tide turning? I'm not so sure yet, but it does feel like the waters of justice are warming up. Just a bit. Let's talk about that. Because justice matters. So let's talk, again, about why the Department of Justice policy saying we can't indict a sitting criminal president has to be revisited and rescinded. Because justice matters. So we just learned that back in late December, Donald Trump told his Department of Justice officials to lie to the American people, tell them that the election was corrupt, the election was fraudulent, and Donald Trump said he will just take care of the rest, together with his friends in Congress. Where do we go from here? Donald Trump must be indicted, federally indicted, because justice matters.